All right, so let's jump into lesson 3 here. So we're going to do a quick composite, and we're going to explore a lot of different selection tools and selection methods. So up to this point in class 1, we talked about making a selection using the rectangular marquee. We talked about some of the lasso tools, and we'll look at a few more of those today. But first, let's zoom in and look at our sand dollar here. So our ultimate goal is to cut these pieces out using selections and then move those pieces up here and arrange them into the composite. So let's start with the sand dollar, and we're going to use a new selection tool called the Magic Wand, and it's your 4th tool down over here. Yours may be displaying a different tool. Get rid of that. There we go. So if you click and hold, you've got Object, Quick, and then Magic. So let's do the Magic Wand first. And you get the same sample size that we were looking at in our first class for selecting color. So when we sampled here, you could decide how much of a sort of an image circle and various colors around where you click that you want it to sample from an average. Same concept here, just turns it into how generous it's going to be with what it selects color-wise. And then also as far as how generous it is, you'll see tolerance over here. And it defaults to 32, so let's start there. And you're really just going to click on your sand dollar, and you'll see that with the tolerance of 32, it's not going to pick up these darker brown areas or the sort of black lines or spots down here. So you'll see if I drop my tolerance down to 0, it's going to be really strict, like incredibly strict, and really not select any more colors than what I'm picking to begin with. If I jump up to, let's just say 150 tolerance, it's going to get just about everything except for those super black spots kind of right down there in the center of the sand dollar. So let's also do this really quick. If we jump back to a tolerance of 32, we saw in the sand dollar where we have a variety of colors, tones, and all that, doesn't quite do the job. If we click on something like the red background, though, it does a great job because the red is basically all the exact same color. So it doesn't have to try and select anything more than what the original color you sampled was. So let's look at a different selection tool and try that on the sand dollar. So if you click and hold on your magic wand and go to the middle tool here, so that's the quick selection tool. This is a similar outcome, but you can kind of treat it like a brush. So as you, let me just demonstrate over here. As you click and drag, it'll start to select light colors and try to kind of find colors and edges that match what you've already got selected. So as I kind of click, hold, and brush to paint, it will select similar colors and try to find edges of what I'm actually selecting. Sometimes it does a great job, sometimes a terrible job. Let's just say once again, with all of our selection tools, oops, we started selecting the shell. We can use those keyboard shortcuts, so Shift to add, or Option or Alt to subtract. So if I'm holding Option or Alt and I start painting again, it's going to start subtracting those pixels. So if your selection kind of gets messed up from what you were going for, you don't need to deselect and start over. Sometimes that can be easier, but you should be able to kind of go back and forth with Shift to add and Alt or Option to minus. So if we look at how this tool interacts with our sand dollar and just kind of click and start painting, immediately it does a really good job jumping all the way out to the edge. And then the other thing to keep tabs on in your options panel up here, you have an enhance edge selected. Make sure that's selected. If it wasn't, deselect really quick, check that box on, and then just do a quick reselection. That's just going to give Photoshop sort of the clearance from you to double check all the edges, do a little bit of automatic refinement there. Now the book recommends and instructs us to just use the move tool to cut these and move them out. Move them up to the top. Rather than doing that, I'm going to have us copy and paste. So it's the same keyboard shortcut if you're used to using any kind of text copying and paste or anything on your computer. So just Command C, Command V, or Control C, Control V if you're on a PC. You can also come up here and go to Edit, Copy, and then Paste for the long route there. But let's just copy, paste. You may not see any change, but that's because your new sand dollar is directly over the top of your old one. So if I just move that a little bit out of the way, you can see that it's there. It's just right over the top. And this gives us the opportunity that, let's just say we move this up, somehow we make more changes and we cause a problem and we just need to start over. I can just easily delete that layer and my sand dollar is still right here, and I can reselect it, start fresh. If I move this up and I mess something up, 30 steps from now, there's no way for me to bring this back. I just kind of have to work with what I've messed up and try and fix it. So let me reselect mine and copy and paste. So you can see it created a new layer now, and it just defaults to a generic name, layer 1. So let's just practice keeping a tidy file here. So in your layers panel, if you double click where it says layer 1, you can now rename this. So we can go sand dollar. That way, if by the end of this one we've got 7 or 8 layers, you'll know exactly which one's the sand dollar if you want to turn it on and off or make adjustments to it. So we're going to zoom back out because we're going to end up moving our new sand dollar layer up to the top. So we can either use the move tool, that top very first tool with the crosshairs, the arrows, and it should default to being auto select the layer. So whatever layer you click on, you'll see it jump back and forth. So if I click on my sand dollar layer, you'll see it now selects that. And I can click, hold, and drag it anywhere I like. So I'm going to move that up to the top, and then I can use my arrow keys once again just to nudge it around, adjust it to be exactly where I want it to be. I don't need to confirm or do anything after that. I can just continue to move it. When I'm happy with it, just let go and leave it. The other way to do this would be with transform that we used just a little bit before. So this is set up as a lot of the Photoshop lessons are, they're absolutely perfect fits. We don't need to adjust anything, but in the real world, we would probably end up with something like this, right? It doesn't quite match, we need to adjust. So for that, you can go edit, and then free transform, or the keyboard shortcut there will be Command T or Control T. And you'll see we get this box around our image, and from there, we can just click on any corner, drag it in to resize. If we wanted our sand dollar to be this way, we can do all of that. Adjust size, adjust rotation, then once again hit enter, or this little check box up here in the options panel. I'm just going to undo that since we didn't actually need to resize, but just know that that's there. So let's move on to our coral here. So take note of where you're working. So right now I'm on the sand dollar layer. So if I try to make a selection on the coral, since the coral is not a part of that layer, Photoshop is going to struggle a little bit. So let's make sure we click back down to our background layer and have that selected in our layers panel. So go back up to your quick selection tool, and if you click and hold, you'll go up to the object selection tool for this one. And this is super simple. This is a newish tool, and you'll just draw a box around what you want to select, and then Photoshop is going to sort of cut inward from the edges of that box and try and find where it guesses the edges are of what you're trying to select. So it's thinking, it's working. And there it goes. It jumped right in. Super simple white background, so it did a great job cutting in and finding the edge of our coral there. That would also work great here, I believe, on our sand dollar. Yep, jumps right into the edge. So you can kind of start to play with these on different selections, see what works, see what doesn't. So once again, we've got our coral selected. I'm going to copy, paste, and then I want to rename that layer. So we'll just call it coral. And then we'll just use the move tool. We'll click on the coral layer and drag it up to where it needs to be, right there with our shadow. And we're good to go there on that one. So now let's go down to our next object. Once again, we want to make sure we're on the correct layer. And so let's just say I'm on the incorrect layer. I select this exactly how I want it, and I try and copy and paste. It's going to say could not copy because there's nothing there. That's because we're on the coral layer, and you can see that the only thing in that layer is the coral, which is way up in the corner. So I need to make sure I'm on the background layer. Then if I copy and paste, I get my actual item copied and pasted. So for this one, we're going to use the elliptical marquee tool. So we use the rectangular one up here. If you click and hold on that tool, the second option down is elliptical marquee. And so for this, you kind of have to guess. So if we go up here to where we think sort of the top line intersects and the side of this intersects, somewhere up in here, and start drawing, we can get pretty close, but it's not exact. So in the midst of sort of drawing your ellipse, you can hold spacebar, and as long as you're holding it, it'll let you move your ellipse to adjust. So I can align the top and the side of mine and then I'll let go of spacebar, and I can continue to adjust the actual size rather than just the position. And you can go back and forth as much as you want. So if I get it a little closer in size, but I still need to adjust the position, spacebar, I can move it exactly where I want it and let go. And for us in this lesson, I would just select a little bit in from the edge. Don't try and get the exact edge. There's just no way to get there exactly, and you'll end up with kind of a white border. So once we've got that, we're just going to do the same sort of process. So a copy, a paste, and then a rename of that layer. So I'm just going to call mine plate. Command 0 or Control 0 takes you all the way out to that full screen view. I can just use the move tool now to grab that, move it up here, align it with the shadow, and drop it. Now let's go to our black mussel shell here down in the lower right corner. And the book has us working with the different lassos. So let's reset our lasso tool. Yours might be on the normal lasso. Mine's set to polygonal. So if you click and hold on that, you'll see the 3 different options. So the normal lasso tool is just a freehand. You can draw whatever shape you want. Let go and you'll get a selection. So you can already start to kind of see the limitations of that. It's really hard, especially with the mouse. I'm actually on a drawing tablet, and even still it's hard to get the exact edge there. It's really not possible. You can click, hold, and start to draw, kind of get a feel for that. The only time I really use this tool is if I want to do a really quick, say, selection there, and then use something like the magic wand, holding Option or Alt to change it to subtracting from my selection, clicking, and it's gave me that pop-up because just like I tried to remind everybody, didn't remind myself, I need to be back on the background layer. So if I go back to my selection like I was saying, go to my magic wand, hold Option or Alt to subtract, you'll see I get the minus there on my cursor, and I click to subtract that blue around. So I really only use the lasso for really quick and sloppy selections that I know I'm going to refine. So we've already done a little bit with the polygonal lasso tool. This shell kind of has rounded edges, so I wouldn't really recommend this tool either. You can click a lot of times, and for lower res or less important work, this might work. You kind of can round things off a little bit by clicking a bunch and making little increments. So rather than that, say you could do something more like, and it gets it a little more rounded, right? Still not quite perfect. So let's try our last magnetic lasso option. So we click on our lasso tool, the very bottom one, magnetic lasso. And this is where you click along your edge and hold and just start drawing. Mine jumped out in the middle there, let me start over. Click and hold, and as you drag along the edge, Photoshop's gonna do its best to guess where that edge is and adjust what you're drawing to match. So you can see, once again, not really perfect. And depending on how close you are, it will do a better or worse job of following the edge. So from here, realistically, I would probably start over and do this a different way. But from here, once again, we can combine our selection tools. So if I go back to my magic wand, I can hold Option or Alt to subtract. If I'm missing, let's just say I'm missing a chunk right here, I can go to my wand and use that with the Shift key to add, and kind of click and select some of those different colors to get that added back in. Once again, I think there's too many areas here to clean up efficiently. So for this one, once again, I think our best option is going to be that object selection tool. But it does give us a good exposure to the different lassos and what you might use them for. So once again, same process. We're going to copy, paste, rename. I'm just going to go black shell. You can rename yours whatever you like. And Control 0 or Command 0 to return to that full screen view. We'll grab our move tool, the very top one there. Click on our shell and drag it up. Now here's where the move tool starts to fall short of what we need to do. And here's where you would really want to use that transform that we kind of looked at on the first step. So if we go Edit and then Free Transform about halfway down, or Control T, Command T on Mac, we'll bring up that dialog box again, or the bounding box, and we can move still, just like the move tool. We can resize once again, or if we hover outside the edges, we'll get that kind of curved double arrow, and with that we can rotate. And much like we've seen with other tools, if you hold shift while you're rotating, it will snap to specific amounts of rotation. So it might be like 20 degrees, 50 degrees, 90 degrees, that kind of thing. So it's different intervals, that's the word I was looking for. So if you hold shift, you should be easily able to rotate it from horizontal to a perfect 90-degree rotation. And we can adjust, and then either hit enter or click that checkbox up at the top to confirm your transformation. So let's go back out and let's work on our Nautilus shell. So you can try a bunch of the different selection methods that we have been using and find out what works the best. I think I would probably start with the quick selection tool, and you can see it's struggling there because I'm on the wrong layer. I need to click back to my background, and we'll start to draw our selection there. We'll see how it works. You can see it's starting to jump out, select a little bit of the green background. That's totally fine. We'll come back, hold Option or Alt to subtract, and start painting those colors away. And let's see here. I think that looks pretty good. So I'm just going to copy, paste, and we'll call this Nautilus shell. Once again, Control or Command 0 to go back to full screen there. We'll grab that, move it up here, align it with our shadow. Use my arrow keys to nudge it around a little bit. All right, so before I make the same mistake again, I'm going to click back to my background layer, zoom in, and we're going to add this screw here to each of these four corners. So let's use our elliptical marquee tool. So that yours may be showing the rectangular marquee. Just click and hold on that, and it'll be the second option down for the elliptical. So kind of like the plate we did, you can either start out here and guess where you're going to land, and once again you can hold shift to make a perfect circle, and then move over to space bar to adjust the position, and then let go of space in order to adjust the size again. Another option is to start in the middle, and if you hold Option or Alt, depending on what operating system you're on or what kind of computer you're on, it'll size around the center rather than that upper corner. And you can hold shift once again to get a perfect circle, and then go back to space bar to adjust the location of your selection and all that. Once you've got a good selection, once again, same process, copy, paste, and we'll just call this the screw. And we're going to move this up. And once again, this is way too big, so we'll transform. I'm just going to use the keyboard shortcut. So Command T for me on Mac, Control T for you if you're on a PC. And once again, we can also use Option here as we adjust the size. So if I hold Option, it'll size around the center. If I hold nothing, it'll just size down to the corner. So in this case, I think Option's a little bit more helpful. I'm going to hold Option or Alt, adjust the size how I would like it. And then for this, we're going to duplicate this screw so we end up with 4 of them, one at each corner. So once again, you can either right click on that layer and do duplicate, and then just hit OK. You can also take that and drop it to the new layers button here, just to the left of the trash icon, and let go, and you'll get another duplicate. So I'm just going to delete that real quick. So I've got a screw copy. I'm just going to rename that to number 2. I can click and drag that over here. Just going to create another duplicate, and I can drag that up here. And one last duplicate, and we'll move it over here. I'll rename those real quick. Not a huge deal if they're all named differently. Obviously they're all different layers. One last thing we can do to make this slightly more realistic, all the screws probably wouldn't be the exact same rotation. If I want to, I can come in here to screw 3, go to Edit, Transform, and just do a little bit of rotation on each one. There's a little bit of a trade-off there. Obviously this isn't the world's most realistic composite. But as you start rotating those, you might rotate them just a little bit so that you don't make it look like you have, on this screw your light source is coming from up here, on this screw your light source is coming from down below. If we only rotate them to be slightly different, that doesn't really become a visual problem. So I'll rotate this one just a little bit, and this third one maybe I'll bring back just a bit. Other things you can do here when you're in transform, if you right click on what you're transforming, you can automatically flip horizontal and vertically. That's also over here in your properties panel, which, as you know, changes depending on what kind of layer you're on. You've got these sort of double arrows with a line in between. If you want to flip vertical, flip horizontal, that should work for you. So now we've got all these different layers. In order to not have our file be so long, why don't we show you one other step of organization. So click and select your very top layer. It might be Sand Dollar, it might be another one. The order doesn't really matter because none of them are overlapping. And then hold Shift and click down to your bottom layer. Not the background, but the bottom layer that we created, copying off of that. And then go ahead and click this little file folder here. It's the third option over from the trash can at the bottom of your layers panel. And that'll put all of those into a group. And then let's just rename the group. Let's just go composite pieces or whatever you'd like to call it. So we've got this little arrow, so we can expand and collapse that group. We can still hide individual layers inside of that group, or we can hide and show the entire group. So that keeps our file nice and tidy there. The last step for this one is to crop. And your crop should default to width, height, resolution. And as long as these are all blank, that's totally fine. If they're not, just hit clear. And that should allow us to do a completely free transform of whatever size we want. So I can grab the bottom, bring it up just above the screw there, bring the side in, bring this down, and bring our right side in there just a bit. Once again, as always, you can hit enter or hit the checkbox there to complete your edits or complete your crop, commit to it. And then we can go ahead and save, file save as. And once again, if you want to keep your layers, make sure you do a PSD, Photoshop document. If you don't, you can save it as a JPEG, and that'll be a flattened image with no layers.